SeaWorld, one of America's largest amusement park chains with locations in San Diego, San Antonio, and Orlando, is known for having some of the best marine-themed amusement parks out there. From their start as a more controversial marine-themed amusement park featuring tons of animal shows, to their now presence as one of the biggest thrill chains in the world, over the years they have had tons of attractions come and go from their parks. And today I'm here to tell you about 4 forgotten attractions from the SeaWorld amusement parks. Some of these rides were decent successes and loved by the publics. Others were complete failures and did not last that long in the parks. Anyways, let's get started on today's episode of Extinct Attractions. Today, let's start over on the west coast at SeaWorld San Diego and check out the Tidal Twister. So Tidal Twister, of course, opened on May 24th of 2019, and even before the ride opened, people had very low expectations for it. The ride would be a new version of the Skyline attraction Skywarp model, and this coaster model was already a very unpopular one due to the Harley Quinn's coaster over at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. Ultimately, once the ride opened at SeaWorld San Diego, it had mixed reviews. Some people didn't really like it, but there were some fans of the ride. But it wasn't due to these mixed reviews that the ride ended up closing down in 2023. Instead, it was due to the many different maintenance issues that this ride had. The ride featured a lot of downtime, and when the park wasn't busy, like on weekdays, they'd usually just shut down this ride and just not operate it in those days. And on July 16th of 2023, the ride shut down unexpectedly and remained closed for the rest of the summer. And it was heavily speculated whether or not the ride would shut down permanently or if they were just doing maintenance on it. During some parts of the summer, it looked like they were doing some construction work on it, but ultimately by October of 2023, the park started to tear down the ride. And then by the end of 2023, this ride had just completely disappeared from the park. And this ride, of course, is one that won't really be missed by that many people. And I think this ride sort of marks the end of this type of roller coaster. After the failure of the Harley Quinn one and now Tidal Twister, I don't think they'll really be making much more of these infinity loop type coasters. And overall, Tidal Twister was a very short-lived ride, surviving only 4 years, and it's going to be interesting to see what ends up replacing this coaster. Moving on now to SeaWorld Orlando, we have a pretty big attraction that ended up getting shut down. This attraction, of course, was known as Empire of the Penguin. So Empire of the Penguin was a very interesting ride. It was a trackless dark ride, and at the time in 2013 when it was put into SeaWorld Orlando, it was the biggest ride that SeaWorld has ever built to date. And I believe it was one of the first trackless dark rides ever built, coming before even Disney built some of their big trackless dark rides. And the idea for this dark ride was sort of interesting. You'd go around this ice cave, and then there'd be these projections of this penguin everywhere, and it would take you along on this sort of story through Antarctica. And this ride, of course, opened on May 24th of 2013, and again with this ride, when it opened, it had some very mixed reviews. Some people didn't really like it that much because it mostly was just screens on the ride, and despite having this really cool trackless dark ride feature, it didn't do anything too crazy. But some people really loved it. They liked this new technology they're trying out at SeaWorld, and they thought it was an interesting ride. Unfortunately, this ride, along with the park, got shut down on March 16th of 2020 due to COVID, and once the park reopened in 2021, this ride did not reopen with the park. Unfortunately, due to some technical issues, they weren't able to get this ride up and running again, so they had to announce the permanent closure of it. But one good thing to come out of them closing this ride is that it brought us a new roller coaster known as Penguin Trek. Overall, I'd definitely rather ride Penguin Trek over this previous dark ride, but it's still sad that this ride unfortunately had to go from the park. And now moving on over to SeaWorld San Antonio, where nowadays they have this really cool launch log flume, which I really want to go on. I just want to go to this park just to ride it, but the original log flume that this park had was not as crazy as this one, but still something that's worth talking about. So the next ride we have here, of course, is the Texas Splashdown. So Texas Splashdown here was not the craziest ride ever. If you imagine just any typical log flume at an amusement park, that's pretty much what this was. Anyways, this ride still had a somewhat interesting history behind it. It opened at SeaWorld San Antonio in 1991, but it originally opened in 1987 at an amusement park called Boardwalk and Baseball in Florida. Until that park ended up getting shut down, this ride ended up getting relocated. This log flume ended up operating at SeaWorld San Antonio for 20 years until 2011 when it was sadly taken out from the park. Now, I couldn't find much information about why exactly it closed. It might have been maintenance issues, but this ride actually still sat in the park for quite a few years after it closed. They just slowly kept dismantling more and more of it, and it sort of sat abandoned. And the land where Texas Splashdown sat never got a replacement attraction until last year, actually, when they opened their new launched log flume ride in the park. So it was a bit sad that the park lost this classic log flume ride, but at least the new one, Catapult Falls, looks really fun, and hopefully one day I'll be able to go on it because this new log ride there looks awesome. And now the last ride we're going to be talking about in today's video, which was the worst SeaWorld ride ever, and so bad in fact that it only lasted for 6 months. This ride, of course, was known as Submarine Quest, and it just has such a terrible story. So in around 2016, SeaWorld started these big plans for this massive reimagining of a small area inside the San Diego park. The new land would bring about 4 new attractions into the park, one of which being Submarine Quest, which was supposed to be a part dark ride, part outside interactive type ride. And originally when they marketed this ride, it seemed like it was going to be this really big, exciting attraction that was going to be one of the best things that SeaWorld has ever created. It was supposed to have this really cool game built into it and feature all of these different interactive elements. Ultimately, the ride ended up opening in 2017, and people were very excited to get onto this because of all the hype that SeaWorld has built up around it. But unfortunately, when riders got on it, they just realized how bad this ride was. It seemed to be not very decorated that well. Like, the way they marketed it, it was going to be this really cool immersive ride, but getting on this, it just really wasn't. And then some of the interactive things with the game just didn't fully work like people anticipated. And this ride had so many people really excited to get onto it when it first opened that on some days this ride had up to a 2-hour wait for such a disappointing ride. And ultimately, after only 6 months of operation, the ride just got so much hate towards it for just being a lame ride. It seems like lots of the money spent on this went more into the design and research for the ride vehicles rather than them trying to make the ride actually enjoyable. So after only 6 months, they ended up closing down this ride for maintenance, they originally claimed. And then this ride ended up sitting abandoned for many years until during COVID, they ended up finally tearing this ride down. And this ride was such a disappointment, in fact, that they struggled to sell merch related to it because once this ride ended up closing, they had a ton of extra merch related to the ride, which didn't sell. So they ended up giving some of the Submarine Quest merch to some of the other SeaWorld parks. So if you're at Orlando sometime during 2018, there's a chance they might have found Submarine Quest merch at that park, which was just very strange. Overall, Submarine Quest was just the worst ride ever at SeaWorld, and it makes sense. Just watching some of the videos of it, you can see just how lame this ride was. Anyways, with all said, everyone, that's going to finish it for today's video. Hopefully you did enjoy. That right there was 4 forgotten attractions of SeaWorld. And tell me down below if you remember any of these or if you've ever even been on some of these. These attractions all sound very interesting, and the only one I actually remember is Tidal Twister, since back in 2023, I went to SeaWorld and I really wanted to get on Tidal Twister, but when I walked by and saw us down, I was a little bit disappointed, but it's not like it was a huge bucket list ride for me. But anyways, these 4 attractions are all very interesting. And yeah, I'll of course see you all in the next video in a few days. Just make sure to like and subscribe and turn on those notifications so you don't miss it. Anyways, I'll see you next time. Goodbye.